Hi, I'm Jimmy Young.
And I'm Dan Lothian. Whatever it might be, we are here to talk about it.
It's about who you are, how you act, and more importantly, how you treat others.
If I wouldn't do it, you shouldn't do it. I'm a reporter, so I've got to verify it.
This is really the first time I'm embarrassed to be an American. I'm very comfortable with my masculinity. And
that's why you wear a sort of pink shirt. They're the emojis of real life. This is just out of control right now.
Yeah, I don't think so.
This is not about politics.
How does the president lower himself to the level of a child in a sandbox?
Right. It below that, actually. It's the dirt. Once you get all the sand out, it's the dirt down below that.
Everywhere you are now, you're on camera. People don't know how to act.
If I wouldn't do it, you shouldn't do it.
By the way, I'm never allowed back in a kayak.
This is just out of control right now, and it's red hot.
Thank God it's Friday afternoon live.
I think that we could do the cowbell for
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, we have a cowbell for all our quarters.
Anything that we need. And welcome, everybody, back to another edition of Friday Afternoon Live. I'm Jimmy Young.
And I am Dan Lothian.
And we are at Little Park Media, and we are proud to be joined by Mike Wankum, the chief meteorologist of Channel 5 here in Boston. Mike, thanks so much for coming up here. On your vacation, by the way.
What a pleasurable day, though, to be outside. I mean, the weather's beautiful. Nobody's yelling at me. I'll show up anywhere.
You know what? I think we need more weather people on the news desk just talking about the weather.
I think so.
I mean, granted, it's been a little scary over the last 2 weeks or
so. It often is the only reason some people watch the newscast is to find out what should I wear the next day.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that is the number one topic. People want to know, hey, what's going on tomorrow? What do I need to dress like? And that's one of the things we do. We try to give people an idea of what to look forward to.
Right.
And I think the actual research on that is 70% of the news audience is tuning in for the weather.
Wow.
Is it really that high?
Yes. And that would make it 20% for the news and 10% for the
There's a reason why.
Is that a new math you're coming up?
No, that's been in place for about 30 years, guys. Okay?
Look, and there's something to back it up because producers, my wife has been a producer for, 100 years. Actually, no. Because
I was going to say, be careful what you just said.
No, don't tell her I said that. But the one show or the one segment that always gets cut when they run into time crunches, sports.
Of course.
So based on that, you're the sports guy. You get 1 minute.
Didn't we talk about the lack of respect in the newsroom?
We did.
Right?
Is that it?
That's how we got out to. We talked about the fourth quarter. All right.
That's right. We'll talk about that. That's our tease ahead.
Absolutely.
To the end of the show.
So what we do here every Friday afternoon, besides have a good time and talk about news events, but also everything relates to media. We separate this program into 4 quarters. Actually, we just separated it into quarters.
That's right, because that would be redundant.
That would be a
4
double,
and quarters, right?
4 and quarters.
Right.
Into quarters that are approximately 15 minutes each. And we eventually, what we're going to talk about right off the bat, of course, is the hurricane season that we're in. Because
pretty dramatic.
It is extremely dramatic. It's been scary and dangerous. And, I think that's one of the most fascinating things. And Dan and I were talking about the relationships with the weather people that we've had over the years working in newsrooms. I am a weather junkie.
Right.
And I've learned a lot about weather because I've had to sit through all those weather forecasts before sports came on. And I've enjoyed it and learned quite a bit.
You've eventually learned something, haven't you? Just by being there.
I am the in-house meteorologist at 97 blank 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 in Needham, Massachusetts. Okay? And that's just that says what. And look, I understand low pressure. I understand when the hot meets the cold and what happens when there's a big front and there's all sorts of action going on.
Oh, Dan, when do we tell him he's all wrong?
Does that sound like he really understands what he's talking about? Anybody gets a big front coming in, hot and cold.
But it's very, when we talk about weather, first off, the New England audience is extremely educated. So they're really up on the latest in trends and what's going on. And it's what's really great about broadcasting weather here is that you're really kind of dealing with people who understand, the basics of what goes on. Because some places in some different markets, you go to and it's like, what does the big H on a map mean? What does the big L mean? So these are opportunities where we can actually kind of expand, and I think people appreciate that as well. Yeah. In New England, we've had people have been keeping track of records since our forefathers many years ago were keeping little diaries of what goes on. So I think New England is one of the more educated audience when it comes to weather.
I think we're an educated audience, period, on many fronts. But we're just going to talk
just
about
ask
weather.
Us, we'll
That's right, absolutely. Very proud of that. You've been at CVB since 2006.
2006.
And at last check, did I hear and read right, 10 Emmys?
I've been fortunate. I've got a few hanging around.
I think that's
He
fantastic.
lost count somewhere along the way.
Congratulations! I
Well,
made
they
a
actually
career
made me
out-
count them up.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, so, but it's been life has been good. People have been gracious to me, and I know how to tape $20 bills and a bottle of your favorite beverage to the application for an Emmy. So
and I've sat on the New England board a few times to judge those competitions, so I get it, and it's fun, and I think it's a great way to
and
be
it's a great
recognized.
nap time too. When you're no, I was,
It's great to be to see what else is going on in other markets.
oh, that's what I enjoy judging, just to
Yeah,
see what people are
right.
doing. They go, oh,
Well, you get a good laugh.
Good. But sometimes people are doing some really creative things, and you go, oh, I never thought about it doing that way. Because I mean, that's the whole idea. Is that when you're presenting weather, you know, it's 3 minutes, but you want to make it interesting and you want to make it kind of entertaining a little bit. And how I can teach you, and all of a sudden somebody will come up with an idea, and I go, wow, that's really pretty slick. You know, I remember seeing tape somebody was doing on tornado coverage, and it was after a tornado. We've all done tornado stories about after they happen. And this was actually kind of very creative in how they kind of walked you through in sort of a chronological order. So I enjoy seeing different things and
Get
how
good
people
ideas,
are doing it. It's, you know, where's the next great idea coming from?
One of the big topics that's been out there this week, as we are coming off of one of the worst hurricanes to impact the United States and certainly the islands as well, has been how reporters get into the story, and this line between there are a couple of things, but let's address the first one: the line between helping people and covering the story. And as a weather forecaster, when you watch and you hear this debate, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the first thing, you want people to be safe. I think sometimes, and we saw a little bit of that with Irma, people getting really kind of close to the edge. You know, it's like how comfortable you are. Now, some people accuse me of being a thrill seeker for other reasons, but I will stand on the beach in a nor'easter, but I'm listening to the wave behind me, and I know what I've been on the beach for a long time, so I know what a wave sounds like when, okay, it's time to duck. You know, I think that sometimes when you see people out there, you know, and they tie themselves to a telephone pole, and you're going, are you really prepared for what's going to happen? And I don't know that, and so I kind of get a little nervous when I see some of that. But then I also think Dan Rather did it back.
That's how he made his name.
Exactly.
In a storm like that,
tied himself to a telephone pole. Well,
And we cannot talk about reporters in the field getting slammed by weather without mentioning Shelby Scott.
Sure. For the local audience,
who was they always say, oh, it's a big northeaster. Let's send Shelby out into the weather and watch her.
What hat is she wearing this week?
That's right.
Right. It was all about the hats.
But the other thing about Shelby is that, you know, if it was a dud, she told you it was a dud.
Right.
You know, didn't try to make it into something really, really big. You know, I always, whenever I see a reporter coming in who's new to the market, and we put them out, you know, they're the ones who get stuck on the side of the road during the nor'easter, and they start talking about, this is the worst one I've ever seen, and we all roll our eyes.
The worst one you've ever seen. Yeah, there's been a million before you.
Yeah, you've never seen the real ones when when the houses start getting washed away and things like that.
Do you think it? And believe me, I watched quite a bit of the coverage because I have family and also property in Florida, and. I've been out. I've covered
swampland in Florida for sale. No, it's an old line, but go ahead.
I know. I've covered all of the big storms in the past. I was there for Katrina and Rita and Tropical Storm Cindy and all of those over the years. And producers are always telling you to go out and they want you in the action. But do you think, as a meteorologist, do you think that the audience is gaining anything from someone stepping out, 2 feet into the wind versus where we hear every other word, versus just step underneath the covering at the hotel so we can understand what you're saying?
I think probably to understand what's going on, the inside the hotel, kind of looking out, give us an idea of what's happening for information. But I also want to see what is it like out there. I mean, I look at you and I'm going to watch you getting blasted away, underneath the palm tree, or the palm tree hitting you in the side of the face, and it's going to give me some perspective. Even when we have like our reporters who are down covering like maybe down in Sandwich or something like that, or the snow is piling up. I want to know, how much snow do you have out there? What's the consistency of the snow? I'd like to know the same thing with a hurricane. How are the winds? What is the rain pelting you? Do the raindrops really? Is it muggy? Is it hot? I want to know everything that's going on, and you're my eyes out there. I get a chance to see it, so I see both sides of it. If I really want some information, I'm going to prefer somebody in the studio that I can hear. But if I want to see it, kind of feel it, then I want to see you standing in it and see what's going on. Not, of course, making you in a dangerous situation at all,
Right.
but really get a feel for it, because there's different things. And I'm looking at it different from a meteorological standpoint, too. I'm going, okay, how is that wind being? I've stood in those kind of winds. How is your face getting moved around? Is the skin doing one of these kind of
Right.
things?
Both you guys are into auto racing. You know what that feeling
yeah,
is
but
like.
Well, I don't race.
I'm sorry.
I hang out at racetracks
Right,
because my
okay.
son races.
Right.
But yeah,
But those usually involve helmets, So-
But your head buffers in the wind as you're coming down the speedway,
Right.
going
Right.
120 miles an hour.
And I've been over to MIT into the wind tunnel, strapped in
cool.
there. So, I went up over 100 miles an hour. And, really, you see your face kind of doing one of these sort of things. It's
Right.
a nice facelift. You get it really kind of tucked back there. So, I know what it's like. And it's exhausting. The other thing I'm watching, too, when these people are out in it, you don't realize that when you're in a wind like that, the human's physiology changes.
Right,
You start
right.
pumping adrenaline through. When you come out of a big storm, covering a big storm, you come back exhausted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Because you've just had
definitely.
your body's just been going through like all of this. It's not like lounging around. It's not like those anchors in the studio. You're really doing something around there.
as a one of the things that frustrated me as I was watching the hurricane was, what is this thing doing? And traditionally, it's hard to predict where a hurricane will go. But am I wrong in thinking that this one did some weird movements late in the game?
All of them do weird things. That's probably the given about those. When I put a forecast up for a hurricane track or whatever, and I invariably say it, I say, the only real guarantee I can give you is that this will change tomorrow. It does change. Even the National Hurricane Center, which issues the track, and these are some of the top forecasters in the world, 4 days out, their average error is about 175 miles. And 5 days out, it's about 225 miles error. So when you see that cone of uncertainty, you look at the line down the middle and you go, okay, that's where it's going. But remember, they draw this big cone around the outside and go, this is where it could possibly go. So I think a lot in this case, we saw the west coast of Florida.
Right.
So west coast is going, it's all Miami. You don't have to worry
I
about
said
it.
that.
Yeah. So no problem. Keys, you're screwed no matter what. But
Right,
it's
right.
going to be Miami's problem. And then all of a sudden, it started bouncing against Cuba for a couple of days, and then made its turn up to the north, and boom, there we go. West
Right.
coast of Florida is getting hit. East coast is saying, whew, we lucked out on that one. But the whole state of Florida is only 125 miles wide.
It disappeared at some point. It was covered
It
by
was
the storm.
covered by the
Right.
whole thing. So there were still hurricane warnings on the East Coast, even though this was tracking on the West Coast, just because the wind is kind of blowing right off the Atlantic straight across there. They're having hurricane strength gusts. Right. So it's always, and I say it as well, is when you're going into a hurricane, don't focus so much on that center eye, that line. Look at the cone of uncertainty, look at what it's going to be doing on either side of the hurricane and how you may be impacted. So it's always a challenge.
The American model and the European model.
Yes.
Exactly. Why is there a difference?
European models have more sophistication about them.
They have nicer suits on them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tailored.
They've had too much wine before they've actually looked at it.
Wine,
Is that-
cheese, and nice suits.
That's right.
Well, those are really the two big models that we use. I think we've got access to like 109. Some of them are just climatic more than anything else. But those are your two big models that you have. The U.S. model, which is called the GFS, and the European model. So what's the difference between the two? Well, it has to do in how they're actually put together. I will give you the European is the model to beat. Has been for years. But the U.S. model has made some really big progress in the last couple of years. It is not to be discounted. So you really have to kind of pay attention to both of them. What we look at is we see, okay, there's a lot of variety. I think when we were going into Irma, maybe a week ahead of time, we had it anywhere between Nova Scotia and Miami for a hit. So we really narrowed it down a lot.
Really?
But what happens is you look for those two models, and they may have disparate results to it. And you look at them coming together. And when they come together, then you go, okay,
That's
here's the
pretty much
solution.
right.
That usually happens about 48 hours beforehand. You might get it sooner, you might get a little bit later. That's why when you see a forecast that's, like we're really kind of like we're hedging on a little bit, we don't know where the rain snow line is or where the hurricane's going to go. It's because they haven't gotten that continuity. And those are the two big long range ones. And then as you're getting closer, there's a lot of models which are even closer time frame, running a little bit more frequency going on to them. So you have to remember the history on these is that the U.S. model, by the way, is free. Which people love.
Right.
Maybe the only thing in the United States that's free, I might add.
Oh, don't worry. You paid for it along the way.
That's right.
Your tax dollars were helping. Right. The European model, they spent a lot of money into it. A lot of research went into it. And there's differences in how they forecast. For example, the U.S. model says, all right, here's a snapshot of what's going on. Now we'll put all this information in the computer and we'll spit it out, what's going to happen. The European model is kind of like, as it's going along, gathering information. And even it's beginning its process to the forecast, it's still gathering that information. So you kick those things out. The U.S. model comes out 4 times a day. The European model comes out twice a day. So you're kind of looking for it. You're saying, okay, what's going to happen to those two? And that's what's taking place with those models.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I think was certainly different in this hurricane than I've seen in the past, and obviously this show is about media and media coverage in particular storms in our conversation here, is that there were a lot of people out there who were pretend weather people. And we're not talking about people who work for broadcasters, right. But individuals out there with their iPhones or mobile devices streaming things. I mean, I was getting a lot of my information that way. Right, often I look and wow, here's someone out their window getting me real time from their neighborhood. How do you feel about how technology has put a lot of the real-time information in the hands of the general public?
It's awesome. I mean, really it is, as long as you're safe. I always used to say, if you get pictures, I did this years ago, if you get pictures of a tornado, please, practice safe, but make sure we get it first, okay?
Right.
So, my wife is originally from Seattle, and
love Seattle.
Yeah,
I
moved her to Iowa. Was my first job. Was chasing tornadoes, and so when the sirens would go off in town, she would say, "Well, that's just the symbol to get out of the basement and go take your camera and get a picture of it." But there is so much of it that's coming in, and that's how you find out what's going on. My daughter worked in Marathon, Florida, for a number of years in the Keys.
Right.
Devastated, getting images out of there, trying to find out what was going on. The National Weather Service actually put a satellite over the top of it, so you can see the damage that's going on in very, very detail. It's amazing how good our satellites really are.
Right, exactly.
So we've all seen that from the Department of Defense. And then, so you have that, and then people are putting things out. They're tweeting things out. One thing we ran into a lot, especially after we got done with Houston, with what was going on with Harvey coming through there, we got a lot of fake stuff. You get a lot of people who are sending videos. The producer actually had me sitting there and say, okay, do you know this shot? Do you not know this shot? Are you suspect of this shot?
They were taking other storms and making them appear as if they were right.
There was one they were saying, here's the wind coming in from Hurricane Harvey. And I'm going, no, that's Henderson, Oklahoma, or Henderson, Kansas. It's a tornado back from the early 90s. I remember the video from it.
Wow.
But people are putting that
so this is like baseball stats for you. You remember?
No,
that was back in 1970.
Well,
I was starting to go there, and I said, let me bring it up a few years. I could get in trouble.
But we saw the shark floating down the street. There's the people.
It sucked up sharks, right?
Yeah, people are getting real. Oh, Sharknado. We can go into that one.
Yes.
But there's a whole group of people who just want to kind of like mess up the internet or mess up social media and say
mess you up.
It mess us up. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
they love to do that. Actually.
So now you're fact checking weather. I never thought that I'd ever get to. We've been lately talking so much about fact checkers around general news, but this is the first time I think I've ever encountered this notion of fact checking weather reports from the general public.
There's so much stuff coming in that you go, is that real or is it not real? I can remember one time, we had the Revere tornado not that long ago, and somebody had pictures of it. And we started looking and go, well, not unless they're in Kansas, because there's not a tree anywhere around here, and this is flat ground. But you have to go looking for. So I'm looking for different things than what a producer would. They're looking and going, wow, look at that nice little twist in the atmosphere. This is a great piece of video. And I'm going, no, it's not. There's hay bales there, and the last time I saw, they're not doing farming Revere, on that scale. So,
that's right. And the carnival went out of town.
I was going to say maybe on the beach, but they get those little things looking for coins in the sand, right?
I'll tell you the story about Revere Beach after we're off air.
Well, I tell you what, there's also a serious side to the weather, and one of the things that we do here on our Friday afternoon live is, as we talked about at the top, we separate it into quarters. So that is a very good opening segment of the first quarter. We now move on to the.
Are we ahead in this quarter? No,
we don't keep score. The second quarter that we're going to talk about is the global warming that, according to the White House, does not exist, which we are not going to get into just because we try to avoid the politics.
Even though sometimes we flirt with that line.
Right. Especially when it has relations to the media and what have you.
Sure.
But, Do you believe in global warming?
Well,
let's cut right to the chase. I want to cut right to the chase.
No. But first, I want to back up just a little bit. Global warming, we use that term, and that term has been used quite a bit.
Loosely.
You'll see most meteorologists now are using the thing climate change.
Right.
Okay.
And most scientists are starting to use the term climate change because climate change is definitely going on. When you say something like global warming, right away you think it's going to warm up. Right. And so you're sitting there in the middle of a storm, winter storm, and you're talking about climate change or global warming. It doesn't make any sense. Right. So we've kind of gotten away from using the term global warming and going climate change. Is there climate change? Absolutely, no question.
I don't have time to change that graphic.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. It actually gave me an opportunity to say that because a lot of people were saying the term global warming and they're interchanging the two. And
we meant to do that. Come on, Jimmy. You know
that's right.
We wanted to facilitate
We're
the
production
discussion.
people here.
That's right.
Yeah, let's not go there.
But climate change is definitely. I think you would probably get 97% of the scientists saying yes, climate change is taking place. What their disagreement comes in is how much is human, how much is natural. And that's where you'll find a lot of scientists who are saying, hey, we would like to have more research on it. Not that they disagree with the premise of it. It's just that they want more research. The more numbers we can have in, the more information we can have coming in, the better our forecasts are going to be, the better our scientific conveyance to the audiences. So climate change, yes, and you'll get most scientists who will agree with that one. Where you get the disagreement, though, is how much is human and how much isn't.
Right. And how do you deal with, I know one of the things that I've seen recently because of the hurricane, anytime there's a big storm, this subject matter really sort of percolates to the top. And you bring experts on and they yell at reporters and say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're falling into some agenda by using the kind of language that you do. So how are you able to talk about this issue on the air and not get into trouble, I guess, and for someone to say, you know what, you're a liberal or you're a conservative.
Not that word again.
Yeah, it's become a very politically charged thing as well, which is very interesting.
Politics and weather now.
Yeah. If you go back to the early and there's a certain cable outlet that is probably notorious for being climate change deniers. If you go back at some of the early stories, they were actually on board with it. And then certain advertisers said, don't do that, and they changed their whole thing. And then also it became very popular to be against any administration that your cable outlet was for. And so it was like, well, they're for climate change, we'll be against it. And it's just our way of doing it. So there's a lot of politics that get involved with it. So one of the things that you have to do when you look at a storm, an individual like Hurricane Harvey or Irma, it's very difficult to say one particular event is directly related to climate change. You have to look at it in a broader sense. And so, what happens, and we saw that in Katrina. When Katrina happened, we said, oh, it's all climate change, and we're going to see more and more of these. And then we went through this dry period where we didn't have any. And all of a sudden, we've got two big ones that have happened this year. And so it comes back up again. So it really is kind of a disservice to the science when you say, oh, this is because of climate change. No, they've had big hurricanes before. Was it enhanced somewhat by climate change? Perhaps. We don't know the research on that one yet. We'd like to find out more about it to see what's going on. So, yes, I believe climate change is happening. I think just in our own personal day-to-day, it was rare that we would talk about rain events locally, 2 or 3 inches. Now look how often you have that. It becomes sort of regular. If we were going to forecast 2 or 3 inches of rain tonight, that was a lead story, a few years ago. Now it's sort of like, oh yeah, we get that. So one of the things that's going on with climate change is the atmosphere is able to hold more moisture, which means you have more potential sitting there. So if you can tap into that moisture, boom, you suddenly have it. Hurricanes, tornadoes, severe thunderstorms. And if you look at some of the latest research, it says, okay, expect heavy periods of rain, big periods of drought. Heavy periods of rain, big drought. So when you look at the end of the year, you go, well, this is pretty normal this year. And in reality, it wasn't. Normal is just the averaging of extremes. And you get enough extremes, it looks like an average year. And that's not really true.
One quick thing, does it make your job more difficult, though, when or maybe you just talk about the science and you don't worry about the politics of it, but knowing that there's this sort of political undertone or cloud hanging over this discussion, does that impact you in any way?
Oh, absolutely.
When you're reporting
it's at a point where you say, okay, I'm just going to stay away from it. It's easier to stay away from the topic than anything else. I did a symposium, Western Observatory, and they asked, and it was all about climate change. And I did like an hour presentation, and they asked if the local cable company could record it. And I said no, because I don't know what snippet's going to be taken out and used and how they're going to use it. And somebody's going to say, I don't like that, what you just said. And so you have to really be careful about that.
Right.
You don't want to offend anybody, but you'd like to kind of say, here's what the latest research is. Here's what's going on.
Stick to the facts. What a novel way to talk about stories. I never thought of that. I think that
don't
might
let the
be
facts get in the way of a good
Yeah,
story.
no,
that just messes it up.
Speaking of which, we had a founder of the Weather Channel. His name is John Coleman, I believe. 82-year-old guy. By the way, he retired to San Diego, so he understands where to go to get the best weather, in America, in the world, right? He went at it with a CNN talk show host this week, I believe.
Brian Stelter,
Right, and John does not believe in climate change. And
he's
what I'd like to do,
one of the big proponents.
And let's listen a little bit to it. Well, let's pretend we're listening to it, but the podcasters out there who are listening to it will be able to hear this as they go back and forth. You already know what he said. Let's take a listen and a look.
I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN, but I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
Well, that's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to refute you on the facts.
That's the truth.
I'll simply say that the vast majority...
Please stand back from this issue and let the two sides be on the air. There are 31,000 scientists who have signed a petition that says it is not valid, that my position is correct. And we'll keep battling, and we will prevail in time.
I certainly want to thank our friends from CNN for letting us play that clip, and in fair use, that's what we use anyway.
Yes.
So John says there are 32,000 scientists out there that don't believe in climate change. Now, they obviously did not go to MIT or Lyndon State or any of those other schools, right? Who do you believe?
You have to kind of look at the source and say, okay, what's going on? And you have to remember it's changed. John has not changed his position in a number of years. He kind of like he's bought this horse and he's going to ride this horse all the way to the end. So I think there's new information that's come out. I think that if you're open to some of that ideas and looking at it, you've got to embrace what is new and what's new, the new technology that's out there, and what new information is available to you. 32,000, I don't know. Are there 32,000 people that study climate? I don't know. I defer to the experts. I'm a meteorologist. I deal really with like the next 10 days. I love that. Climate is like climate. We're talking about centuries, and you think my forecast is bad at 10 days. Wait till you go to climate, then it's all over the place.
And it's challenging, I think, for reporters, anchors, hosts having to,
be right.
I mean, look, it happens in a lot of things where we have to become the instant experts on something. Mm-hmm. But now you have to have this sort of toe-to-toe conversation with someone who that's their life, and you have a few facts. And boy, when something like this happens, it goes viral online. And those people, again, the politics comes into it, who who think that the expert is correct. They all say, "Oh, look how," a lot of the slugs that I saw online is like, "Look how he chewed up CNN," or sort of the anti-CNN people were piling on, and then it's just amazing how weather has, especially after a big storm like this, it just becomes this political hot potato.
And it should be political. I mean, it really has a great deal of impact. I mean, look at us with our coastline and things like that. If climate change is happening, if the sea level is rising, okay, how do we need to do this? What do we need to do? Do we need to move? Do we need to build differently? There's a lot of really serious things that need to take place. So, I mean, it'd be great if everybody was kind of on the same page to do this, but, there's always
hopefully they will be after our discussion here.
That's right. So, Mike,
hey, the Flat Earth Society still exists. Okay?
That's right. Wait, the Earth isn't flat?
So, and Dan was bringing this up a little bit too, the accuracy of the forecast and the pressure that the public must put on you because they think for some reason that you actually do control the weather.
Well, we do.
Yeah.
It's built on your cable.
You're going to be responsible.
Breaking news.
That's right. You're responsible for Mother Nature, right?
Meteorologists control the weather. Yeah. Is it remote control or is it connected wired?
We do it with we do a little.
It's Wi-Fi?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Wi-Fi remote. Okay.
And as challenging, and we talk a little bit about how San Diego's perfect. It's 80 degrees every day. And New England, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute, it's going to change.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the fun. That's the challenge in it as well. But for someone who might have a wedding day or an outdoor event, and you do, by the way, everybody does this. If you're doing your barbecue up until 5:30, you should be okay. But then at 6:30, you might want to put a cover on.
The brides are the worst.
Right.
I mean,
what a shock that is.
I've got a June wedding coming up. It's February. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got a June wedding coming up. Is it going to be okay? And the brides' mothers are even worse.
No kidding.
Wow.
They call
I'm shocked.
They want to
at
know the
this.
specific. I always tell them rent a tent. If it
Right.
rains, you'll need the tent, and if it's sunny, you'll appreciate the shade.
That's what we did for our wedding, and we had rain and sunshine.
Right.
So we were covered.
Everything.
Yes, that's how I hedge.
Which wedding was it? I don't remember. There
Well,
were so many of them.
Well, as I said, the wedding because I've only had one, Jimmy.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. Okay, that being said.
But the challenge is, people expect more and more from the forecast, and sometimes it exceeds the science. And we sometimes sit there as well, when we're doing the newscast and we say, the newsroom will always come to you and say, okay, how much snow is going to fall in this town? And they don't want it. People anymore aren't. I'm of a certain vintage, and most of us in this room are.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
You can remember, it's going to snow tomorrow.
Right.
And it snowed tomorrow. That was a win.
That was
Right.
a win.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
It was not.
Now it's
how much snow is my driveway
Where,
at what time?
That's right. And of course, in Massachusetts, the South Shore and the North Shore and West.
Oh, tremendously.
Three different
yeah.
variations right there.
Yeah. The difference between the Cape and Worcester can be, nothing to incredible amounts of snow.
Right.
So, which we saw just this last winter. Right. So the demands of the audience, and so people see, well, my app says this. Well, the app can say a whole lot of stuff.
Right.
So it becomes more and more of a challenge, and sometimes it just gets to the point where it's like, you're really asking to exceed what we know. Granted, a few of us have been around for a while that we can kind of look at and go, this reminds me of this storm. It reminds me of that storm. And you can draw upon
some
that
context, very historical
context. Put some context into
right.
it, and also kind of know, all right, when it happens, this is where it's going to flood. This is not where it's going to flood. We know that this beach is going to look really bad during a nor'easter. Okay, we'll send our crews
right.
there.
The audience may not be able to appreciate this, but the dirty little secret is that there are certain low-lying areas that if you had a sprinkle, you would have flooding. And so you always, I remember there's so many different places.
In New Bedford.
Right.
We always
go to certain places.
There's going to be some idiot that drives his car into there.
Right.
And it's going to be
so you just go and wait, or you go and stand, and you'll get your visuals there, no matter what.
That one hill, everybody slides down.
It slides down the hill. You get the
now Scituate, nobody used to go there. They would go down to Brant Rock more than anything else. And then I started going to Scituate because it was really good. And now everybody goes to Scituate.
They go there. You have to find a new spot to get your weather shot.
Yeah, right by the White House. You know, it's great. Awesome waves, and it looks good. So
my favorite storm, because I was a junior at Tufts University, was at the exact same time that my career started at WBZ when I was Mr. Meyer's producer. Was the blizzard of '78. And as a junior in college,
I'm way too young to remember.
I don't remember that. I wasn't born yet.
Anybody else out there over the age of, you know what? I turned 60 this week. Deal with it, okay?
Actually, I was born in '78. That was just a joke.
All right, that's right. I was also at the Bucky Dent game in 1978 too, I might add. So that was not actually, for a junior at Tufts University, getting an extra week off in the middle of the semester was pretty cool. All right.
Yeah.
Were
you going to swear?
Yes, it was.
Were you going to?
I almost did.
I
almost did, but I caught myself.
Thanks for checking up on that one.
I don't want to get that explicit language warning.
That's right. You did a good break check.
Thank you very much. I can't really. No, yes, I can remember every night of that week. It was a lot of fun. I do remember that. Yep. But it was also really scary too, because literally it just stopped. I mean, those pictures of the cars that pulled over on 128 with snow, and they had to call out the National Guard to use the front loaders to just clear the paths. I mean, and it had to do with the fact that it happened so fast over a short period of time. Correct? I mean, almost 2 feet. And I know Mark Rosenthal, who is a meteorologist, and he was one of the few that actually said we're going to get killed here over 2 feet of snow. And I think he's made a career on that prediction.
There's actually more people who got it right than you'd be surprised. There was one who didn't get it right, but then we'll leave that person.
It's not an easy thing. And the weather guys, they always say to me, what if you had to predict the outcome of every sporting event in your area every night? And people would remember how many times you were wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, too, is that a blizzard of '78 will happen again. Of course it will. Will it happen to that degree? Probably not. I mean, just think of the things that have changed. The tires are better on a car. Cars are better. The forecasts are much better. I mean, so you're not going to probably have that same thing. But you mentioned it there. One of the things that came out of the blizzard of '78 was people saying, boy, the community came together and really helped out. And you're seeing that with Irma, and you're seeing that with Harvey. You're seeing communities coming together and helping out, and people really, it brings out the best in people, even though it's the worst of times.
Think about that. And Dan, you and I have had very deep discussions about this. I bet liberals and conservatives are actually working together to survive.
They were brought together, right?
Whoa! Republicans and Democrats, blacks, whites, Jews, Gentiles. What a novel idea.
That's right. Although I think there was one place where they had a checklist as the boats were coming by. Well, hang on a second. What party are you with? No. just kidding. No, you're right. That's goes to your point. The human spirit, and that's one of the great things about this country. We saw it after 9/11. It was amazing to see what happened up on Capitol Hill. And every time, I mean, my Facebook feed was just jam-packed with people saying, I have a car you can borrow. If you need a place, you're down in Florida and you don't have air conditioning, come over to my place. If you need food, it's amazing. People who one moment were screaming at each other about, are you pro or anti-Trump, are now not even mentioning that and saying, I will help. Right. That's the great thing to see, to be reminded that still exists somewhere in the back of everybody.
And you kind of wonder, maybe the yelling and screaming that we do right now, really when it's all said and done, is it really worth it?
No. I can tell you right now, I don't wonder about that at all. It's not. Okay, and we spend far too much time talking about it in the media. I just want to say. That's why we watch the Hallmark Channel.
That's right.
That's the end of the second quarter. It's
halftime.
It's halftime. Halftime is when we get to do shameless plugs, and we also have
the cheerleaders don't come out and do a show.
Well, they do, but just for us. They're over there. No,
that's right. You know what?
We should get cheerleaders.
No, we should not get cheerleaders, okay? I don't want to even go there.
It was an interesting idea.
Yes. And by the way, I do consider competitive cheerleading a sport. I don't want to get letters and emails.
Yeah,
they are.
It is
a sport.
It's a dangerous sport.
It is a very dangerous sport.
I've seen people fall off those towers.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. That being said.
Boy, that's a road I didn't think we were going to go down at halftime.
Neither did I. But I want to throw up a picture, because we have a picture of a very impressive panel of people at Regis College this past Monday night who had a great conversation called D-Hate Debate. And from left to right, I'm going to need the person in the middle, but I think
camera left.
Yeah, but it's Thomas P. O'Neill on this video. By the way, if you're actually listening to this, just imagine the picture of Thomas P. O'Neill, the former lieutenant governor. Get it? You get it. Okay.
Right.
Jeanette McCarthy is the mayor of Waltham. Janet Wu from Channel 5. Is this Lynn
the president of Regis.
And do we remember her name?
And,
of course not.
Why did you do this?
I don't know.
Come
it's
on,
my fault. It's totally my
fault. I know
fault.
her name, and you're setting me up.
Ms. President.
Right.
Seti Warren, the mayor of Newton. And look at that, Dan Lothian, along with the Metro West.
Yeah, I had on my risers.
Metro West
I was
Daily
standing
editor.
on a box.
And by the way, this is a picture I took, so I don't have to courtesy Metro West Daily, but that's the editor right there on the right-hand side.
That's right.
And
no, it was a wonderful discussion that we had around, well, basically what we were just talking about here. This climate where you can't say anything without being attacked physically sometimes and certainly verbally. And how can we get over this? How can we get beyond that? It's wonderful that we've seen a break in this around this time when the nation is, certainly Florida, parts of the country are dealing with these storms. But, you know,
does it take a hurricane to be
right,
nice?
and it shouldn't, right?
Really.
You should be.
No,
so what are some ways to do it? And we talked about how, you know, certainly in a college environment that you should introduce into classes. I gave this as an example that maybe first day you say, okay, write down a couple of things that you don't like, you're scared of in someone else. Maybe it's someone's religion or maybe it's a race, but you make a list of some things that you have not been exposed to, and then you should be forced to go and spend that semester with that person or go and visit that synagogue or whatever it may be, because so much of what goes on in this country has to do with the fact that people don't know. They haven't been exposed to it, right? They've been raised a certain way or in a certain area, and they don't know, and they fear what they don't know. So cross that line, get to know it. Maybe some of that will come out of the.
Well, when I went to college, that's really what that was. That was an eye-opening experience. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. You know, I mean, very, very, you know, homogenized group. And so by going to college, I was exposed to it, and I go, oh, okay, because I never knew what any of these things were, you know, or who these people were. I never met people of different religions or different races or anything like that. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience. It was Mark Twain, I think, talked about it. It's hard to be a bigot when you travel. Because you see things.
Exactly.
You know?
Right. So this was great. Sometimes I get a chance to do this, and it was a wonderful discussion that we had at Regis College in Massachusetts.
And it was a packed auditorium, and I was there, and I enjoyed it. And we do want to give credit to some of the images we're showing of Metro West Daily News. All right. Now, something really cool we're going to get to do in a couple of weeks. We're going to take this show on the road.
On the road?
Not
we
once.
teased it last time.
Twice.
Twice.
Twice in the same week. So
exactly.
That's going to be an.
I've eaten roadkill. It's quite. No, I'm sorry.
It absolutely could be. But we're going to give it a shot. We're going out to the Media Resource Expo in Westboro, and I think we've got a little background on it coming up at the DoubleTree in Hilton out there in Westboro. And this is actually run by a friend of mine, Jan Hoy of Scholastic Media Association of the Northeast, and I've known Jan now really for over 10 years. And it'll be an opportunity to talk with the latest, greatest gadgets, all sorts of streaming hardware and new cameras and virtual sets and all that neat stuff that is supporting the media world.
Right.
And we're going to get to interview some of the people, the manufacturers that are there, the representatives and all that stuff. And I think even some educators too, which will be great.
That's right. Yeah, it'll be a special edition of the show. And
on
again,
a Tuesday.
On a Tuesday, right. And you know, we will certainly talk about the technology, but since this is a show about really what's going on in the news, we'll try to incorporate some of the things, whether it's how people are using their technology to help reporters, to supplement. We were talking about that earlier. And then we'll get a chance to see what is the next piece of technology that will be in everybody's hands, or what is that little gadget that's being attached to phones that allows people to get some of the videos that they're getting. So we're going to try to, you know, connect it, not just kind of put the gadgets out there for you, but connect it to some of the things that are happening in the marketplace now.
There you go.
So yeah, that's coming up, and we look forward to that.
Very excited about that.
Yeah.
All right, so
also, what we got to talk about the little project that we're doing here at Little Park Media. We do all kinds of production work, videos for corporations to help them tell their stories. We do documentaries, all kinds of interesting things. But we've been doing a little bit of animation and helping companies do creative things. And so Jimmy and I, Jimmy taking the lead on a project that is unusual. We made a towel come alive. It's a jump towel.
It's a jump towel. See, the University of Wisconsin, at every sporting event after the third quarter, they actually jump up and down. The entire stadium is jumping. Okay,
that's right.
And it's been going on for years.
It's tradition there.
It's a tradition now. And anyway, one of our local businesses has come along and helped us. It basically said, look, I need this video done, and we created this video. So we're going to run it, and we'll kind of, I'll fade out the audio so you can actually hear the rhythmic drumming that goes with it. It's only about 20 seconds, but you'll get the idea when you see it. Go ahead. That's the jump towel for the University of Wisconsin.
One of the projects that we worked on this past week.
And I'll tease
Little
you,
Park Media.
There's actually one in the works for a certain football team that plays in New England. But I can't use the name, but I'm going to guess you're going to figure out what it is, and we'll be able to show that, I believe, next week. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, he's a good client of ours.
Now, we're on the third quarter. Let's. I need a bell. Thank you. All right, we're on to the third quarter. And what you see and what we're going to talk about is females in sportscasting and females in meteorology. Meteorology. Yeah. And never an easy word to say, I might add. This past Monday.
Try to spell it. It's even worse.
That's why they have spell check. This past week on Monday Night Football, a woman by the name of Beth Mowins became the second female to broadcast an NFL play-by-play game. And I just wanted to make sure we put out a salute to this because there is a great trend now in broadcasting. It's a great opportunity for women to get involved with both forecasting weather and also calling sporting events, which is kind of outside the, back in the day, they were weathermen.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think we even now refer to them as weather women.
No.
No.
But they've gone, that's come such a long way, and sports seems to be where weather was way back. It's moving right along.
Some of the best meteorologists I work with, are happen to be women. To me, it seems like, why is that a topic? It shouldn't even be a topic. It should be there.
Well, by the way, neither should race or religion or status. But
I'm very fortunate, even though I'm not young. My mother was my boss.
You're young.
I know I am.
Wait, your mom was your boss?
My mom was my boss. When I worked, we worked on a farm and we had a restaurant.
I thought she was running the TV station.
No.
Which is great. But you didn't tell us that. You buried the lead.
Mrs. Hurst.
Right.
But no. So my mom was my boss. So I always saw women as running the show. Why aren't they running the show?
They do in the house I live in.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, they should be there. It's like, why shouldn't they be there?
But what is sad though in this particular case, and we won't.
Why did it take so long?
Yeah, well, that too. But the blowback, and we're not going to quote some of the things that were said online.
Nasty.
There were a lot of critics out there, male critics, who were not even looking at something that she may have done wrong in calling the game. It was really all they had to say was they didn't like her. Yeah. There was this mental thing, or maybe the ear thing, that they were hearing a woman's voice go in and they shut it down. And that's disturbing, that there's still a lot of people out there who have a problem with women doing some of these roles that traditionally have been done by men.
Anything different shakes them up.
It does.
And that's what bothers me.
Yeah, they
instead of embracing it and finding out more and actually giving her a chance. She has a very deep voice. And, we were talking about cheerleaders. I've always found that cheerleaders, back in the day anyway, used to have a very deep voice because they had to cheer and, they wanted to project.
Well, they were hoarse from screaming the whole time.
That's another story.
Did that.
And I actually enjoyed listening to Beth. I've heard her before do college football games. And let me tell you, she was better than the other guy in the booth who was doing color analysis for the first time, Mr. Rex Ryan.
That's right, yeah.
I will throw him under the bus, okay? But I just also think this quote, I'm going to read the quote because she gives credit to Gail Sirens, who did a game in 1997 or 87. I have this written down, but it's in the other room. Anyway, the quote is, and this is from Beth, it's not official until tomorrow, but I'm calling a Monday Night Football game on September 11th. Honored to be putting my name next to yours. Been a long time coming. I want to know that you've always been the star. You've always been the star to reach for. Thank you, Beth Mowins, to Gail Sirens. I love that.
Right. I look forward to, and you touched on this, I look forward to the day when we're no longer doing these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
You know, I think recently there was the first woman to be a ref at a NFL game,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
In the NFL, and we make a big deal about it, and you know, they look wonderful to see the progress, and every time that happens, we can applaud that. But I just, boy. And maybe it will happen in my lifetime. I would just love for these stories to go away, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's
I do see that with my children. That
I was going to say, young people can lead the way on this, right?
Yeah, I mean, my daughters will look at me, you know, if I bring up something in this, you know, this realm, and they'll look at me like, huh, why?
Right.
You know, it doesn't make it has no bearing to them whatsoever.
That means you've done a good job as a parent.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Well, no, you have.
Yeah,
no, we
you
know it's
have.
the most challenging job ever.
It is, and
Yeah,
we've talked about it a lot.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. But that is, you know, let's face it, guys. Hateful doctrine is taught. It is taught.
Exactly.
It is taught in the homes. Unfortunately,
Right.
it is taught in other areas, at clubs or what have you. And until that disappears, you know, we're going to have to deal with these things. But I do agree, the innocence of youth. They'll accept anybody. I love it when the stories of the Israeli kids and the Palestinian kids meeting at age 2 and becoming friends for 10 years, if not lifetime, after that, because they're not even worried about all the
until someone tells them they're supposed to hate each other.
Right,
yeah,
you know,
right.
then that
Exactly.
becomes a problem.
And who's this person that's telling them that?
Right.
All right, we
By
have-
the way, I should point out, you
Yeah.
know, this is the first time we've had a guest in studio for the entire show.
That is true.
Usually there would be a segment, but you were
And
so
we'll be the last
gracious.
one after
No. You were so gracious to give us your time and to come in here, and we
No,
wanted
Jimmy
to.
said he's buying me lunch,
You know,
so that's right.
Oh well,
can
yes,
buy you
Jimmy
lunch.
is. No, yes,
Be happy to do that.
We'll have lunch. Yes,
Be happy
we can
to do
have
that
lunch.
downstairs. It's a great Chinese restaurant place. Anyway, let's move on to the next graphic, which is a kind of a tongue-in-cheek graphic of female meteorologists that all are wearing bright clothes and a very
Actually,
similar dress.
Do you have one like that?
Yeah, I do. Mine's blue, and I'm like, this is actually, and I recognize this once you put this up there. This is the exact same dress. And what it has, it's become very popular for female meteorologists because it's inexpensive. It comes in 3 or 4 different colors, and you can wear it. And so they have this whole group of female meteorologists who kind of have a Facebook page, and they say, hey, clothing is really expensive. I mean, you know, buying clothes every day. We can wear the same thing. You know?
Right.
Well, there was a guy in Australia, newscaster there, wore the same blazer every day for a year. Nobody ever called him on it.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
actually
thing.
have one of those. It's now duct tape on the inside of it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
yes, I have one of those. All you have to do is just change the tie.
Exactly. Well,
You know, and it's a new outfit.
Years ago, when color television was first coming out, I worked with an anchor who was that time period. They had like 3 blazers: a blue one, a yellow one, and a green one, or something like that. And people would come up to him, "Where do you get all those clothes?" Because all they do is change a shirt and tie. every
Right,
day, you know,
right.
But
Yeah,
it was
it's
that
much
day.
easier.
So that's what this is actually the same dress being worn by a number of people. But the whole key to it is that it's inexpensive and it looks good.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
And that's
that
the key.
works.
Yeah, and, you know,
Utility.
and
The
just
utility,
for the,
yeah.
And just for the record, as I'm researching weather meteorologists, females, I also found the 10 sexiest male meteorologists.
Are you on that?
And unfortunately, I was looking for you, and I did not find you.
I thought he was on the calendar.
And there's also the ones that have best anchor with best hair.
Right.
Right.
I'm not on that
Right.
one either. You know, it's like my wife one time, and she meant it as a compliment. She said to me, "You didn't get here on your looks."
Oh my!
She meant it as a
Thanks.
compliment. She
Right.
meant it as a compliment that I was smart.
I
You know?
get it.
But it didn't come across that way. So
Oh,
you
that's
will
funny.
not find me on the best dressed or any of those lists.
I get that. All right. Anyway, we can move on to the fourth quarter now. And this is the quarter where we get to talk about anecdotes from our careers, our personal lives, pretty much anything you want. Whoa! We did see a glimpse of something moving.
Who's that?
All right, so I might as well say it. Okay, I was fortunate and blessed enough to spend a week in Italy.
Birthday week.
At birthday week, I turned 60 years old. I woke up in Rome, and this is actually the
And you didn't know how you got there.
don't remember how I got there. Actually, I want to forget that plane ride, let's
Right.
just say. But this is
Stowaway?
Monte Rosso. It's part of the Italian Riviera on the north side of Rome, on northern coast. It was absolutely one of the most beautiful spots I've ever seen. And
And all the beautiful people.
and I have a significant other who was amazingly gracious about
Right.
taking me on this trip.
Right.
So needless
In
to say.
northern coast of Italy.
That's right.
Right,
coast
not
of-
Rome.
That's right.
Rome doesn't have a northern coast.
Right,
but
well,
that's
it's north of Italy on the
Right,
coast. Maybe
right.
that's what I wanted to
Right,
say.
that's
My
what you-
brain scrambled after a week in Italy. Do you know how much wine I drank in Tuscany? By the
But
way?
northern Rome is nice too.
All right, it's scary to see your face. It's scary to see your face over your right shoulder. So we can
Wow.
move on to the
Rome
next.
I
New
didn't,
York,
that's right. I didn't realize you had those little specks in your glasses.
Yes, a little
I've seen
ones.
you. That's
High
interesting.
def.
Are those the same ones?
Yeah. Oh,
Wow.
yeah, it's not like I went
Interesting,
on
the
Dr.
detail. Wow, that's interesting.
And that's an iPhone selfie.
And you didn't shave then, but you didn't shave today either.
That's right.
There
So
you
it's
go.
the same. Okay, can we move on from this slide, please, off the monitor? Thank you. Oh, good. There. Now we have Dan Lothian on the set at
I
Regis
shaved.
College.
I shaved.
Shaved, cleaned up, handsome.
That's right.
Well,
Although
it's
what's
just
interesting-
the antithesis of the other photo, isn't it?
but my story, and you know, we try to tell stories about in fourth quarter about some things that have been happening in our lives, and little tricks in the media. And I broke my rule, which is with a white shirt, you never want to wear a light color tie.
It's all about
because
contrast.
because it can disappear. And this has happened to me on air, and you end up looking like a priest, because you can't. It's like, oh, he has a collar. So it's nothing
so
against
I can call
priests.
you. Whoa. That means I can call you Father Dan.
You can call me Father Dan. Yes, exactly. My kids call me that, by the way.
I understand.
But there's a reason for it because I am their father.
Right.
So, but no, and I remember when I was putting the tie on, and for those who don't know that much about television, you really have to kind of think sometimes before you walk out in front of a camera, because depending on how the light hits you and so forth, the colors, you never want to have lines, because at least in the older cameras they moire. Right. Now it's a lot of movement can still throw it off a little bit, but cameras are getting smarter and better. But I was thinking about it, and I knew, and I just liked the tie. I put it on, and then I end up looking like Father Dan.
I think that's good.
Yeah, but you can't even tell I'm wearing a tie, except for the knot up there. It looks like it's a white tie and a white
nicely
shirt.
tied knot, by the
He's
way.
on.
I work very hard on tie. I know how to tie. The knots. Oh,
Can you
man.
do it without looking?
Of course I can.
There you
I
go.
am the tie expert. I could be in a championship.
Okay, so-
I could
true
story.
to do the little dimple in there and make it.
try to.
I'm going to
man.
challenge.
I'll win every time.
Half
Every
Windsor,
ti-
full Windsor, and the old Boy Scout knot.
I don't
right?
give it names. I just say
No, they're
it's the
different
style.
knots,
No,
though.
I know they're different knots, but I think
All right, I'm
I think I can
going
do
to
it.
challenge.
Oh, wait,
you.
he has this.
True story. When I first started in television, remember I grew up on a farm in Iowa.
Right.
I had no ties. You didn't wear ties. Dress
Right.
bibbed overalls. It was good. So I got hired to do television weather on the weekend in a small station in Iowa. So the guy who lived next to me in the dorm knew how to tie ties. He tied all of my ties,
And then you just
and
slipped
I
it over.
slipped them off.
Slipped.
And I kept them that way
Interesting.
for like 2 years. And I can remember sitting there watching TV some Sunday night, taking the knot apart and learning how the knot was put together.
Wow,
So I had no
that's a
idea. how
great
to tie
story
ties.
from back in the day.
That is a good one, and that's the
Wow.
kind of thing we look for in the fourth quarter. By the
Yeah,
way, Mike.
exactly.
It's a great job. I appreciate it. And once again, this is Friday Afternoon Live with Dan Lothian, and I'm Jimmy Young. We got Mike Wankum from Channel 5 in. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure.
You truly
Right.
are one of the really good guys in this
Yes,
business.
no, you are.
Okay,
You are.
and you've confirmed it.
I
now.
owe him $20. That's the whole
You-
deal.
And he races motorcycles.
And there's racing involved here, so
Yeah,
you
that's
guys
right.
can actually talk a little bit
That's
about
right.
racing. But
We cut him completely out of the conversation.
That's right,
for a while.
right.
We're just talking racing.
That's right.
I love race. Don't get me wrong. I was just trying to put the show together while you guys are talking about racing, and I'm like, come on. The podcast now is called Friday Afternoon Live. There is a visual and a video component to this that we live stream it on Facebook every Friday afternoon-ish. The ish being 1 minute to 30 minutes before we get everything
Although we're
together.
getting close. Well, we were getting closer
We were.
to 1 minute. And
That's right.
Yeah, today we kind of stumble a little
That's
bit.
all right, but
fine.
you know what? It's not easy to put it all together with
Right.
a deadline of noontime. And
Exactly.
that's what we're
And we
trying
don't
to
have
do.
a staff of 100,
No,
although
we don't.
someday we will.
That's
although,
exactly right.
Yes, maybe not.
That's exactly well. So
I saw the 100 people, and
Right.
and I love the atrium. That
Those
you
were
have
those were
overlooking-
those were the protesters.
So
But
anyway.
tease ahead to our next show.
And the
we're
next
gonna,
show,
really
there-
heavy subject matter.
we're gonna spin it a little bit. In that we did not talk about Jamel Hill from ESPN, who tweeted out some rather I'm going to use the word racy Twitter comments about the president and repercussions from that, as well as the banner at Fenway Park this weekend. That will rear its ugly head again next week on our show on Friday.
Yeah, we're going to
Afternoon Live.
focus on just, is there a double standard, especially when it comes to ESPN, where certain voices in the media are allowed to express themselves and others get cut off and fired. And there's been so much discussion around this. So we were talking about politics and weather, now politics in sports, and the kinds of freedom of speech or lack thereof, if you will. That's a big subject matter, and we'll be tackling that next week on Friday Afternoon Live.
All right. So for Dan Lothian and Mike Wankum, our staff here.
You can
by
wave
the way,
at that
we've
one.
looked at
That's
the
the-
back of your head.
Yeah,
all right,
no,
Mike.
you can wave. Well, you can look
I keep
back
wondering
to
what
it.
you're looking at over here. Oh,
There is a camera back there.
For Dan Lothian, Mike Wankum, our staff of Steve Helmuth, our director, and a new production assistant, Ryan Silva, in the other room, who filled in admirably, by the way, for Scott Mullally, who did make it here and has recreated our graphic a little bit. So we want to give him credit for that as well.
Thank you very much.
We had a very fun and entertaining conversation here on Friday Afternoon Live, and we'll hear you and see you next week. Thanks for watching.